We literally climbed over the fence. We were on the red carpet with our little beat up cameras. And when we started showing that, people would it looks like we were watching something we're not supposed to. And that's really what started the whole red carpet.
Some people dream of building an empire, while others actually do it. Larry Namer wasn't supposed to become a media mogul. A kid from Brooklyn who started as a cable repairman ended up creating one of the most influential entertainment brands in history.
We had over 100 rejections, one which even at the meeting, the guy literally threw the business plan at my head. At that time, starting a TV network was somewhere closer to $100 million. The worst thing you could do is say to people, just imagine you've lost them. They can't imagine.
This is Larry Namer, co-founder of E! Entertainment Television, a pioneer who redefined how the world consumes media, and a relentless entrepreneur who's never stopped building. This isn't just a story about television, it's about vision, resilience, and the courage to bet on yourself when no one else will.
Once ChatGPT became ubiquitous, now I'm getting done in 1 hour, what used to take me 5 days. As human beings, we all have a finite amount of time on this planet. The best thing we could do is use it efficiently or effectively. Find something you're good at, work your butt off, and become great at it. And then that will become your passion.
So Larry, you went from splicing cables in Manhattan sewers for $90 a week to building a $7 billion entertainment empire that spans 142 countries. You've had the #1 TV show in Russia. You're the only American allowed to run media in China, and you created the Kardashian phenomenon. You've literally lived through the entire evolution of television. But what I found the most interesting, because I was listening to some of the shows that you've been on before, was that your real passion wasn't originally entertainment. So talk to me about this accidental discovery of entertainment and how you actually got into this game.
Sure. I was the first kid in the family to ever go to college. So I got a degree in economics, and I thought I would either become an economist or a teacher. And then I quickly found out there weren't really jobs for either of those. So I had a friend whose dad was in the electricians union. It is in New York City. And they said, oh, we just organized this thing. It's called cable TV. I'm not really sure what it is, but, here's the name of the shop steward. Go see him. Tell him the union sent you, and they'll give you some temporary job. And so I did that, and they gave me a job literally under the streets of Manhattan. So I was an assistant underground splicer for $90 a week. And so I thought I'd be there for a few months until I figured out what you do with this degree. But I started to like it and stuff. And, very quickly, people were coming to me and saying, gee, how did you learn how to use the equipment so quick? Usually takes people a year and you're doing it after a week. And it was very simple. I'm like, well, I read the instruction booklet. And it wasn't rocket science. But I went from assistant splicer to splicer, and then, kind of moved up the ranks of the operations side. So being a construction guy, then an installer, then a service guy. And then what happened was Time Incorporated, which at that point was still a publishing company. Um, they had made this decision that over 10 years they were going to become a media company. This is pre-Time Warner, way before Time Warner. And so they bought Manhattan Cable. That was the company I worked for. And so I somebody in HR said, hey, trying to figure out what it is these guys do. They go under the streets every day. You had all the Harvard and Yaleys on one side, and then you had us on the other. And somebody in HR said, wait a second, there's a guy, who does that, who's got an economics degree, maybe. So I kind of became the translator between those two worlds, between the tech world building it and, the Harvard and Yaleys. And then after a while, guy that they timing put in as president, a guy named Nick Nicholas, who later went on to become the chairman of Time Warner after the merger. He kept trying to get me to come into management, and then finally he convinced me. So I ended up, it was like really crazy. I was 25 years old and I had risen through the ranks of management, becoming the director of operations of Manhattan Cable, which is the biggest cable system in the country. And so I did that. And then uh, kind of like 1980, all the big cities began to realize that cable was more than a vehicle for good reception, and a lot of the big cities started issuing franchises to be built. And but the one caveat that most of the big cities had was they didn't want the wires to go on telephone poles because it was incredibly unsightly. They all wanted them to go underground. Well, there's only one underground system built in the U.S. then, and that was Manhattan Cable, and I was the guy who was running operations. So I ended up getting recruited by it was actually a Canadian company, won the franchise for Los Angeles to build the first 61 channel two-way interactive cable system there was, but all underground. So I got recruited by that company. They made me the proverbial offer you couldn't refuse, literally paying me like four times what I was making in New York and rented me a house with a swimming pool and all of that stuff. And but so we built that, and I started. Now I had programming and marketing and finance reporting to me, as long as all those other things. And you're a New York kid, and all your neighbors in LA are going to parties and premieres and hanging out with celebrities and stuff. And I'm like, hey, that looks really cool. I want to do that. And I call the studios, and they go, no, 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 you're a utility. You like the gas company, and we're not putting you on the party list. So finally, I met a um, somebody in marketing at one of the studios, and I said, I really don't understand this. The most effective marketing vehicle you have for a movie is the movie trailer, that 2 minute thing that they always show before the movies. I said, but the only time I ever see the movie trailer is when I'm already in the movies. I said, wouldn't you want me to see that while I'm at home to make me want to go to the movies? And they said, yeah, but it's too expensive to buy 2 minutes of TV time, so we don't do it. I said, great. You give me those trailers, I'll put them on TV for free, and you put me on the list for all these movie screenings and stuff. And they went, sure. So, we did that, and I hired a kid, and literally we just looped them together for, we did like an hour reel of the movie trailers. But when we started doing market studies of the audience, we said, what's your favorite channel? And they go, oh, I love, ESPN, I love CNN, I love that trailer channel. And I'm going, wait a second, I'm getting the best 2 minutes of a $50 million movie, then movies are only 50, and I get that for free, and people are telling me it's one of their favorite channels. And I kind of filed that in the back of my head. And then the company that I work for, the Canadian company, they had actually sold, and they went back to Toronto, and they were like, okay, Larry, when are you coming up to Toronto? And I'm like, no, no, no. I said, I didn't go from New York to LA to go to Toronto. I said, I'm done with cold. I'm not doing that. And so a friend of mine, my friend Alan Marufka, who also from the East Coast, we were talking, and he was out there on a project, and he had something to do with Francis Ford Coppola's studio, but he was more on the real estate side. And we said, we really like LA. Let's think of something that will keep us out here. And he goes, yeah, I've been playing with this idea, like entertainment tonight, 24 hours a day. And I went, wait a second. I said, this is the time when MTV was actually showing music videos. And I said, you have MTV puts a host in front of a green screen, and they point to the screen and go, and Madonna has a new video. I said, I could get all these movie trailers for free, and people love it. And we'll send a host in front of a green screen and go, and Schwarzenegger has a new movie. So so basically we turned the idea to MTV of the movies. And we wrote a business plan. We thought we were really smart. And then it was before you actually did all this stuff digitally. So you actually had a business plan that was like 200 pages and stuff. But we were a little naive at that point. there's never been people, regular people, that have actually ever started a TV network. Only big media companies do that. And that's kind of what we got. People are going, you know what, Larry, it's a good idea, but you're not Rupert Murdoch, you're not Time Warner, and you're not Fox or Universal. You can't just start a TV network. Um, we weren't smart enough to listen. Um, so we just kept going. But 3.5 years later, we we met this guy that was just took over investment banking for what was a bond house on Wall Street. And somebody we knew introduced us. And by this time we were beaten up. We had over 100 rejections. One which even at the meeting, the guy literally threw the business plan at my head and said, "How dare you insult me with such a piece of junk?" And we we finally we met this guy, and we go in his office, and he's got movie posters on the wall, and he said, he goes, "I really love this. I want to do it." And I'm like, at that time, starting a TV network was somewhere closer to $100 million. Kind of low end was 60,
But it's still very
and
expensive.
yeah, and we, because you had to rent satellites and all studio equipment was expensive, and he goes, "I really want to do it." I said, "Well, great. Could you give us more like the 100 million so we could do everything that we know we need to do?" And he was like, "No, no, no." He goes, "I'm only allowed to sign for 2.5." And I'm like, "Well, what is that going to do?" I said, I can't even buy the cameras for $2.5 million. And he goes, "Well, that's all I'm allowed to sign for." And, Alan and I just said, you know what? Chances are nobody's ever going to give us 60 or $100 million. So we'll take the 2.5. And I had a friend who was teaching radio, television, and film at the University of Texas in Austin. And I called him up and said, "Brian, do you have kids that need intern jobs?" And he goes, "Yeah, we had a lot of trouble placing kids this year." I went, "Send them, send everyone you got." And yeah, and people don't realize that, because he is in 142 countries and valuation is, crazy, 7 billion. And yeah, arguably he is now the number one influencer of pop culture in the world by far. And so people assume that it started with a big company, but it really started with me and Alan, 11 employees, and including us, so 9 employees plus me and Alan, and 31 interns at University of Texas. As soon as we got on the air, um, everybody who came to us and said, "Oh my God, that's what you wanted to do. We would have given you the money 3 years ago." And so, we were an overnight success. And I think in the first year we ended up expanding to 14 countries. And my friend Brian wanted to kill me because half of the kids, they started out as interns at the beginning of the summer, and by the end of the summer, half of them were vice presidents. We just grew so big so quickly.
So it took off fast. It took off very fast when you got it
Yeah,
off the ground.
but it really taught me this lesson that when you're pitching something that people have never really seen or experienced, or something to really compare it to, that the worst thing you could do is say to people, you know, you give them what's in your head by saying, "Well, just imagine," and that's it. You've lost them. They can't imagine. So it really gave us both really good lessons on learning how you pitch stuff, and how you had to explain it, because what we were thinking in our head clearly wasn't getting across to people until they saw it. Um, so that was a good life lesson, actually.
When you think about what made it so popular, what was the kind of programming that you figured out just hit that blew up? Because I mean, like that, you blew up fast at the beginning, but then if you look at your other wins, I mean, Talk Soup, the Kardashians, Howard Stern. So you have an eye for this. I'm sure there's a lot that didn't work, but we could talk about the ones that did. What was the difference?
Well, first of all, uh, uh, the whole thing of celebrity reporting was incredibly stiff. It was things like Entertainment Tonight. So if you had a new movie, you would fight for get 20 seconds on Entertainment Tonight. So it wasn't really in-depth coverage. And everything was done by big studios, yeah, the Paramounts and the Disneys, and stuff, and it was very stiff and very corporate looking and very polished because they could afford the $100 million. Um, Ours, because we didn't have a lot of money, we had to be very inventive. We didn't even have professional broadcast equipment. We ended up finding some company that had like old equipment that they're using to make sales training tapes. So we bought that. But what happened was, and again, because Alan and I didn't come out of that Hollywood world. So we looked at a lot of stuff and go, look, Hollywood is funny stuff. Let's not make believe it's rocket science. So a lot of stuff looked very pirate because, again, we didn't have a lot of money and, we didn't have the fancy cameras or the effects or the editing equipment and all that. And people would watch it and go, oh my God, I never thought I would see like a half hour interview with my favorite director, or now I learned about movie music because we would take these movie trailers and slice and dice them in like 20 different ways. So we would have movie music, we would have foreign film, we would have indie film. Uh, we literally had every different kind of film and film related person, and but again, it looked very pirate. But one of the things that really I think broke us through was the first year we applied for credentials to go to the Academy Awards, and they rejected us. They basically said, "Well, you're not really interesting to us. You're more like a utility. You're like the gas company or the phone company," and they wouldn't give us credentials. And what happened was we literally, me and the crew, climbed over the fence. We snuck in. We were on the red carpet. And, then everybody was still doing the same old, so, Mr. Cruz, tell us about your next movie. And, we were there like, we were like, wow, we snuck in. We can't believe it. Hey, Tom, those are great shoes. Where'd you get those? So we were just asking the questions that really interested us, and and again with our little beat up cameras and stuff like that. And when we started showing that, people would like send us information like letters and calls and go, wow, it looks like we were fly on the wall watching something we're not supposed to. Well, the fact is they were. We got caught and thrown out, um, but we had enough footage that we made good shows and people loved that. And that's really what started the whole red carpet thing. I mean, the way the carpet gets covered changed dramatically because of us. Um, and that led to things like Joan Rivers doing talk, fashion police and stuff like that. And then we, we kind of did that. And then when we started getting a little bit of traction and we started getting a little bit of money, we went from just showing movie trailers. And but again, we didn't have a lot, so we had to be very creative and inventive. I went to the team and said, "Hey, I have this idea. I want to do a TV show that makes fun of TV shows." And they were like, "What?" They go, "That doesn't make any sense. Nobody will let you do that." And that show was Talk Soup. And, that was the first breakthrough, more traditional 30-minute TV show. Um, and Talk Soup just, then Greg Kinnear blew up. And you look at all those people that have followed on Talk Soup that have become famous from it. I think we counted 17 people who were Talk Soup hosts that ended up getting jobs on, like, we call them real TV. And, so that show, while it started out as people thinking Alan and I were out of our mind, I think ran 26 years. Um, is something. And then the next one, we met this tall guy in a elevator in New York, and he was telling us about he's a radio host, and we were like, yeah, okay, great. As a guy, if you haven't realized, radio's been dead for like 40 years. And he's going, no, you got to come and see the show. And we went and watched his radio show, because I think we were living in the same building. And, so we said, oh, we're going to run into this guy. It'd be kind of rude if we didn't go and see his show. And, then we just loved it. And we went back to the crew and said, hey, we want to put cameras in this guy's radio studio. And they were like, Larry, when you wanted to do, put Talk Soup, we thought you're out of your mind. They go, radio's dead. Why would anybody watch a radio show? And I said, you know what? You don't understand. There used to be a TV show, a sitcom called WKRP in Cincinnati. And it was about a radio crew, an ensemble crew, but it was a comedy. I said, this is a reality TV version of that show. And, you know, because it was an ensemble comedy. I mean, how it wasn't just Howard, it was that whole entourage that he had, you know, and then Howard broke out. And then we grew. The first year, I think 14 countries. And because we realized, and a lot of people weren't paying attention, that, you know, for US cable networks, if you're doing something like the Weather Channel, yeah, it's a great utility. You know, instead of having to watch TV at 11:30 every day, at night to find out what the weather would be tomorrow, you had a channel that would let you see the weather anytime you wanted. Um, but that was very local. If you didn't live in that city, you know, or in that country, you couldn't care about what the weather is in London or anything like that. But we said celebrity and celebrity culture are popular all over the world. And that turned out to be very, very true. So, um, but you go back to the origins of the idea. At that time, we looked at cable and said, you know what, it's like an electronic newspaper. You had CNN as the headline, and ESPN as the sports, and QVC as our home shopping network is the ads. But what was missing, so obvious to Alan and I, was the second most read section of any Sunday newspaper, which was the entertainment pages. So, you know, we went from, you know, MTV of the movies to, you know, the entertainment pages of the Hollywood newspaper. You know, it's what America wants to know about Hollywood.
NetSuite is a success story partner. Now, what does the future hold for business? If you ask 9 experts, you're going to get 10 answers. Bull market, bear market, interest rates are rising, they're falling. Honestly, at the end of the day, we just need a crystal ball. But until then, over 42,000 businesses have trusted and future-proofed themselves with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one cohesive platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth giving you the visibility and control that you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. And when you're closing the books in days, not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If I needed this kind of business management system, NetSuite is exactly what I'd use. So whether or not your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges in your business and seize your biggest opportunities. And speaking of opportunity, you have to download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning. The guide is free for all listeners. That's netsuite.com/Scott Clary. Indeed is a success story partner. Now, say you just realized your business needed to hire someone fast. How can you find amazing candidates fast? It's easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you stand out and hire fast. And with Sponsored Jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, Sponsored Jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, with Indeed Sponsored Jobs, there's no monthly subscription, no long-term contracts. You only pay for results. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed, and listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility. Just go to Indeed.com/Clary right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Clary. Terms and conditions apply. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. You know, it's very interesting because you keep coming up with all these ideas that have never been done before. Everything in your life is doing things that really have never been done before and not listening to everybody who's telling you that it can't be done. And what I find really interesting, so I read your book, and if anybody wants to get it, it's called Off Script, and your real passion is cooking. Now, I find that interesting because that means that you built your entire career and all of E on something that you're not actually that passionate about. You're not passionate about entertainment. Cooking was the passion. So when you're going up against the grain, when you're doing all these things that have never been done before, when you're not even inherently that passionate about the thing that you're doing, what is the advice to keep going when you get told no, when it's not working out, when you're doing something that is completely blue ocean, never done before? Because that's a skill set in and of itself.
Yeah, well, I was cooking since I'm 12 because both my parents worked, and my choice was either learn how to cook or eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for dinner every night. And but I liked it and I was good at it, and I just kept reading cookbooks and learning more and more and diversifying. But what I say to people, a lot of times people get confused between what their passion is and what their hobby is. And we all have the same realities of life. We got to make enough money so we can pay the rent and eat and educate our kids or pay our college loans or whatever it is. So what I tell people, I said, find something you're good at. In my case, I obviously was pretty good at the television stuff. I said, then just work your butt off and become great at it. And then what happens is that becomes your passion. And then you could use that to make enough money to be able to pursue your hobbies. And that's what cooking, the whole cooking was for me is, look, TV was obviously pretty lucrative. I was pretty good at it. I still am pretty good at it. And but it lets it gives you the ability to then focus on your hobby whenever you feel like focusing on your hobby, without knowing like, oh my god, I may not be able to pay the rent next month.
I think that's wise advice. I think, and I'm also very curious what you think about about new media and content creators and everyone trying to become their own media channel and media station. And I feel like a lot of it is just copying the other creator. My podcast is probably a copy of, 15 other podcasts, and that TikTok channel is a copy. What would your advice be coming from an entertainment TV background for somebody that wants to create something unique? How do you look at the world? How do you create something that's never been done before the way you did it?
Well, I mean, I embrace new technology. I mean, a lot of people like, oh my God, we're not going to allow that AI stuff to happen. And I say, look at the music industry. When digital music came around, I said now they bitch and moan that, oh my God, iTunes has so much power or Spotify has too much power. I said, but you as an industry, music, spent 10 years fighting it as opposed to embracing it. You would have owned it. And now you're complaining that somebody had the brain power and the wherewithal to go after it while you were rejecting it. The same thing with AI. There are certain things that, yeah, there are a lot of things that can go wrong with it. We need rules and regulations, and we need ways to keep it orderly. Um, right now, there's no deterrence for bad people who, to do bad things with it. But the fact of the matter is, it's a great tool, and it's going to exist whether you like it or not. Screen Actors Guild or Writers Guild and stuff like that. So, you better learn how to prompt and learn how to do this stuff because it's not going away. And, but storytelling is an art, and it's practiced really well only by humans and stuff. So I've been using AI and stuff for the longest time, um, from even before it became, world known. Um, if I have a new idea, um, for a TV network or TV series and stuff, and I want to write, like, do a little bit of market study and research and do budgets and stuff. It used to take me 5 days to come up with a basic idea. Um, Once ChatGPT became ubiquitous, it takes me 30 seconds to plug it in. It takes me an hour to clean it up because it's never 100%. But now I'm getting done in 1 hour. What used to take me 5 days. And I say to people, I go, how do you not love that? I mean, as human beings, we all have a finite amount of time on this planet. And, the best thing we could do is use it efficiently or effectively. I said, so now in 1 hour, I get done what used to take me 5 days. I could either do more of them and make more money, or, now I got a little grandbaby. I could spend time with my little grandkid. I could learn how to speak Spanish. I could go on a cruise, and I mean, I've reclaimed the most valuable thing that all of us as human beings have, and that's our time. Um, so you got to embrace it. You got to make sure that, again, you need rules and regulations. You can't, and I always give the example of like driving a car. A 12-year-old kid can't say, "Hey, give me the keys. I feel like driving." You got to be a certain age, you got to take a class, you got to take a test, and then there are rules of the road. And if you don't obey the rules of the road, there are penalties for that. With AI and stuff, there our rules and regulations need to catch up, and and that's kind of where that's at. But like I say, when you come up with something new and it's in your head, you gotta I self-assess every night. I wake up in the morning, I have 10 new ideas. By the time I go to sleep, I realize most of them were dopey. But I'm very honest with myself. I could I'll sit down and go, okay, sounded like a good idea this morning, but no, and again, I'm shrinking the time frame. But technology changes, people's taste changes, the economic environment changes. Just learn to be honest and go, you know what? It sounded like a good idea, but now I realize it's not. What's next? And just move quickly on to the next thing. Because again, we're back to that issue of maximizing the value of your time.
I love it. And you're right. Like with AI, you can you can adopt new ideas quickly. You can brainstorm new stuff quickly. You can realize that it's a bad idea quickly and move on. But also to your point, everybody in any media, sort of legacy media, anyone in film, TV, if they don't learn how to use AI, the people that work in those industries will also get replaced. So whether or not you're a content creator or you're working in those industries, you gotta adopt it.
Yeah, it's an incredibly valuable tool. I mean, a good example. After God knows 20 years of people, telling me I got to write a book, I finally did it, and the book went uh, bestseller in 4 days. And people going, "What did you do? You cheated." Well, it's impossible. You're a bestseller in four different categories in 4 days. And the fact of the matter is I was still in the Chat GBT days. Um, I used GBT to design a marketing plan for the book, and I followed the marketing plan, and the AI understood how to use the algorithms much better than my human brain could. And literally, by following the plan done by AI, we became a bestseller in 4 days. When people are going, no, it usually takes months. How did you do it? Well, that's how I did it.
I love it. Um, talk to me about the Kardashians because you built out. I mean, we spoke about Talk Soup, Howard Stern. Kardashians is a cultural phenomenon. How did you discover it? How did you know that it was going to be good, or did you?
Well, at the beginning, though, Alan and I were friends with Bruce and Chris. Um, and it's a whole long story, and I think it's in the book. At one point, we were going to do another TV network called FX TV, Fitness and Exercise Television, and our partners were Bruce and Chris Jenner and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, um, a bunch of other folks, but also one of our partners was O.J. Simpson, and obviously that didn't turn out well. Um, but so I was friendly with Bruce and Chris, and Chris was always like, "Oh, we got to think of something to do with the girls. The girls are so good and whatever." And Bruce and Chris, between them, I mean, there were like 10 kids, because they all came from other marriages, and um, but the kids were underage when we first met them, and again, we didn't have a lot of money, so we had to be really careful. So we couldn't afford to do the things that were needed to have young kids on the set. I mean, you needed to have tutors, and you could only do a certain number of hours a day or a week. Um, so we just said, hey, the kids are great, but you gotta wait till they turn you know, adult age, so we don't have to deal with those restrictions. And but look, he gave them the platform. But quite honestly, and I say to people, the mom, Chris, she's the brains behind it all. She those those girls and guys just learn what they did from their mom, who was a great driver and stuff like that. And so yes, we did give them the platform, and they probably couldn't have become what they became without that platform. But the real driver of that family was the mom, Chris.
Like in 2025, are there any people or trends or ideas that you're excited about that could be as big as the Kardashians?
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff is cyclical. I mean, look, the Kardashians have done amazingly well. Um, but, I get people all the time saying, I want a TV show, I want to be this, I want to be else. I mean, the one we haven't talked about is Ryan Seacrest, which that's where Ryan got his start. Um, but you and I actually have this mutual friend, Natasha Graziano, and yeah, I must get 100 people a year who come to me wanting to be a TV host, and you need several components. The main ones being, you need to have the personality, but then you have to have the work ethic. And a lot of times, I meet people whose personalities are great, but then you get to the issue of work ethic, and I go, okay, you want to be a TV host in daytime, so that means you're going to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You're going to go into hair and makeup till 5. You're going to shoot till 11. You're going to go home. You're going to have lunch. You're going to go to sleep, and you're going to do it 50 weeks a year. And they're like, oh, no, no, no. I spend the summers in Ibiza, or I spend the summers in the Hamptons. I can't do that. And so you realize they have one or the other, but very rarely do you find people who have both of those traits. But then I met Natasha, and and several things. Number one, she's not from the U.S., which I thought was a plus. But she had this great backstory. Single mom, living in London, literally homeless. Cut to now, 8 years later, she's living in Bel Air and life coaching Will I Am and Steve Aoki and all of that. But she's motivational, inspirational, as opposed to promotional. And for me, that was important because I said, you got all these guys in late night TV here. We have no women in late night TV in America, um, and they all do the same show. It's a guy sitting behind a desk, and he's got a couch, and it's the same. So, Mr. Cruz, tell me about the next Mission Impossible. And I said, particularly after COVID, we need. I want to go to sleep with a smile on my face. I want to think tomorrow is going to be better than today was. And so she's, you know, had the motivational, inspirational, but then I would test her. I'd be like in China, and I would intentionally call her knowing it's 3 o'clock in the morning her time. And she would actually pick up the phone and stay on the phone with me for hours. And I said, okay, got the personality, she's the motivational, and the work ethic clearly is there. So we created this talk show, late night talk show, which is going to go on this winter on national TV, called Natasha After Dark, and and that's just a great example of how you could take something. And again, we couldn't go and pitch it and explain it to people. So we had to shoot a pilot and cut a sizzle and then show them how different this show was from anything else that was on.
I love it. And that's, I mean, if anybody's listening, like the traits that you just described that like make a successful talk show host, anchor, just successful person in general, the work ethic, the personality, the showing up. I mean, if you just emulate those traits in any industry, you're probably going to be pretty well off. I think that those traits are those are the prerequisites to build anything meaningful, whether or not it's a career in TV or a career in anything, really. Um, One of my favorite ideas that you discuss is that you reinvent yourself every few years. I think when I listened to this, it was every 7 years. A lot of people really struggle to reinvent themselves ever, and they're the same person at 70 as when they started their career when they were 25, 20, 25. Talk to me about reinvention. Why is it so important?
People go, well, why did you stop doing running E yourself? I stayed on the board, but quite honestly, I got bored. We became huge, and Um, it was this great thing. But when you get to the issue of it, and it's kind of like when somebody convinced me to write the book, that I really began to focus on this. I said, you know what? I do have like all these kind of 7, 8 year periods where I'm a totally different person. So I had my Brooklyn years and my Manhattan cable years and my Valley cable years and my years, my Russia years, my China years, my post-COVID years and stuff, where just entirely different and stuff. I got to admit, China does keep my interest because it's just so huge and there's so much different opportunity there. Um, but it's basically staying fresh and stuff and staying up with new technology. I mean, I'm really keen on making sure that whatever the new technologies are that are coming down the road, that I'm there before the big companies get there, because it takes them so much time to, they study, they write plans, they have board meetings, and they get the stuff probably a year or 2 years later than they could or should.
ShipStation is a success story partner. You know what separates successful online businesses from literally everyone else? It's not just having great products. It's delivering an amazing shipping experience that keeps customers coming back. All of my friends that run the biggest e-commerce companies, they use ShipStation, and it has completely transformed how they handle orders. They save thousands on shipping costs thanks to their rate chopper tool that finds the best discounts. And what makes ShipStation brilliant, you never need to upgrade because it grows with your business no matter how big you get. And they offer discounts up to 88% off UPS, DHL Express, and USPS rates, and up to 90% off FedEx. It integrates seamlessly with every selling channel you're already using, and your customers get branded tracking updates to keep them happy and informed. When shoppers choose your products, you turn them into loyal customers with cheaper, faster, and better shipping. No credit card required. Cancel anytime. That's shipstation.com, code success story. HubSpot is a success story partner. Now, the future of business is happening right now, and you don't want to miss it. That's why you have to be at Inbound 2025. They are bringing together the brightest minds in marketing, sales, business, entrepreneurship, AI for 3 incredible days in San Francisco, the global epicenter of innovation and technological disruption. Picture this. You are learning directly from Amy Poehler about creative leadership. You're getting AI insights from Dario Amodi, who's literally shaping the future of artificial intelligence. Here's what makes Inbound special. It's not just the great keynotes. You're going to dive into breakout sessions where you can immediately implement what you learn. And plus, San Francisco's legendary startup ecosystem provides the perfect backdrop for networking with all these great entrepreneurs, decision makers, industry leaders, peers who are actively shaping the future of business. From September 3rd to 5th at the Moscone Center, you're going to be surrounded by forward-thinking professionals who turn insights and ideas into breakthroughs. Don't just watch the future unfold, be part of creating it. Visit inbound.com/register to get your ticket today. You know, you mentioned China. What are the things that, first of all, why are you excited about China? What are the things that we could learn about how they do media? Because I think that you predicted linear TV's death a while back. I know that China is always sort of cutting edge in terms of media and social media and a lot of different things. So what's China doing? What gets you excited? What's stuff that we should maybe try and emulate?
First of all, there two different things there. So there was no legacy media there, to speak of. Everything was government controlled. Um, so cellular and and digital and stuff were all new there. Um, so you didn't have to spend a lot of time taking away old habits. You would just had to spend it on creating the new habits, um, and then much more open to stuff. And plus, a very simple thing, because here big media is controlled by public companies, so they're very slow to adapt, because it really means writing off old date. You got to write off the old before you can get to the new. I mean, I talk to like people, chairman of like TV networks. And I'm going like, why are you still doing linear TV? I mean, it makes no sense. And they're like, well, it would be like a $7 billion write-off, and I'm going to retire in 2 years, and I'm not walking into a boardroom or a shareholders meeting saying I'm writing down $7 billion. They go, I'll retire. Let the next guy deal with that. So it has nothing to really do with what's right or what you should do or reality, but there are these other things in play that kind of restrict us. But in China, We do TV, film, internet content. We do immersive. We do all kinds of stuff there. And people who watch our TV shows, well, first of all, we're successful in China because we we make stuff in China in Mandarin language specifically for the audiences in China. So we don't take what we do in Australia and go here, we'll subtitle in English for you and go with it. China's 3 or 4 times bigger than the United States. And people in China are very proud and happy to be Chinese. And, what people have said to me early on, they go, look, if you don't really want to do something in here in our language for our people, you're in the wrong place. And I think Rupert Murdoch learned that pretty early on because he got bounced out pretty quickly. Um, so, but you just take the TV shows we do there, and 70%, 70, it's probably a little more now. I'm going back a year. The people who watch our shows watch them on a 5-inch screen, watch them on a cell phone. And so we've had to learn to adopt production and editing and stuff, noting that, if we're going to shoot a wide shot, which looks great on a 55-inch TV, it's going to look horrible when you put it on a cell phone. So a lot of stuff we shoot, is a lot more close-ups and headshots, and so do it. And which really, that whole phenomenon led to the whole thing going on now with vertical. Um, Vertical programming is now beginning to take care in short film 2-minute movies and things like that. We've been doing that stuff in China for years. So I think there's almost 800 million people in China with a smartphone now. So, it's a pretty good base to experiment against.
I think that, I look at some of the other stuff coming out of China, and there's like e-commerce trends that are coming out of China, and the way people shop and the way people buy, the way people consume content for sure. I think that's going to be, I always think that a lot of the things that we see coming out of China in terms of just behaviors, they're going to make their way to the US eventually.
Yeah,
So it's just a matter of
absolutely.
time. So you said 70+% of people consume just on phones. Not surprising. You were also doing something really interesting in China where you create movies broken down into 2-minute segments, and then audiences buy them piece by piece. I don't think that's made it to the US, but that's another form of like short content that I think you could see in the US too. So again, that's like short content, vertical. Um, and this is something that creators should pay attention to. Like, okay, what am I seeing in China? How can I adapt my content to that? Because that's what's going to be coming down the pipeline.
Yeah. Well, you all you got to do is just go to the App Store, and you'll find that there are a bunch of things. They need a market, they need to catch up, but that's come over here already. And interesting, most of them are actually owned by Chinese companies. But the theory, and again, we come at stuff from a different place. We look at whatever we create as a media play has to be financially sustainable. We don't do it because we think it's wow, we're so creative or we love it. Uh, but if you can't sustain it financially, don't do it. Because eventually, like I say, the realities of life take over. Um, but with short films, you take um, uh, or serialized film. You make a 90-minute movie. Yeah, most of them now are like rom-coms, very inexpensive, 300, $400,000 for a movie, but use folks who are really good at soap opera writing, because soap opera writers learn to write in 2-minute arcs. Because and if you watch the pattern of storytelling in a soap opera, they literally are broken down into 2 minutes and a little cliffhanger, and then 2 minutes and a little cliffhanger. So you make a 90-minute movie, you divide it up into 45 2-minute segments, more or less 2 minutes. You don't have to time them out, and you give people the first 10 episodes for free, but then episode 11 is like the equivalent of $1. It's not a big deal. I liked it. It was good. I want to know what happens. Does Janie kill him? Okay, for $1, you find out if Janie kills him, and then on and on and on. But you look at the financial model there. So you then have 35 segments that you're getting $1 for. So on a 300 or 400 million, million movie, you're getting a $35 ticket price. Yet look at Marvel spending $200 million on a movie and getting a $19 ticket price. Who's got the better model?
Do you think that, I mean, at one point, you had, 142 plus country broadcasts. Now we have all these individual creators, these podcasters, these YouTube channels. Do you think we're moving towards infinite like fragmentation of media, or do you think that we'll ever see like unifying media sort of taking hold? Because I see all these individual podcasters as sort of like and media channels as the new age, like the Joe Rogans, the I mean, pick a YouTube channel, the Mr. Beast. It seems like infinite fragmentation of media.
Yeah, you'll see. Whenever new media comes out, and I hate to say it, I've been involved in probably new media 7 or 8 times in my 50 years. Um, when it first comes out, people are very forgiving of quality and content. Um, but over time, right now, there's like some crazy number of podcasters. Everybody thinks I buy a camera for $40 and stick it on my laptop, and I put a lamp over my head, and I'm a TV star. Well, it doesn't exactly work like that. Um, but then you get to the audience, and at the beginning of any new technology, people are very forgiving of poor quality. He is a great example. He forgave us for, using industrial equipment. But over time, the eye and the brain begins to expect more and more and more. So we actually dove into the podcast world last year because in post COVID, I started doing a lot more in the U.S. again, and we just said we know where it's going. We know that yeah, that people are going to want better quality out of their podcasts and their podcasters. Um, uh, so rather than start at the low end, we decided that our podcast got to start at the higher end. So we actually shoot. We do a lot of women empowerment related stuff because we thought that was a niche that really could be developed well. Um, but we shoot our podcast in 4K. We shoot it with 4 cameras. We switch live. We edit. Um, we audio engineer design the audio, and lighting guy design that and stuff. So when you watch it, it really looks like television. I mean, the first one we did is called Stall Talk, and it looks like a younger, hipper, cooler version of The View, um, and stuff. So um, more and more, we love podcasting because there are no barriers to entry. There's no gatekeepers. Um, but you got at the end of the day, you got to be good. Um, and we think there'll be a huge shakeout, and a lot of the stuff that's going on now. I mean, for several reasons. The economics are just not there. Um, Big advertisers need mass. They can't afford to keep buying audiences of a few hundred people and stuff like that. So you gotta build them up, and you got to get sponsors to keep them self-sustainable and stuff like that. But it's not this or that. I mean, a lot of times I need stuff quick. Give it to me quick. I'm a big TikTok fan. I love TikTok. Um, you know, but it's during the day, I'm in the car, I'm on the bus or the train, and I just give it to me in 2 minute bites, and I'm good, or 40-second bites, and I'm good. But then I come home, and you know what? I want to lump out on the couch and have a beer, and so I want those half-hour shows. I want the Spielbergs of the world to tell me their stories because they do them better than my college roommate did. So it's not this or that. It's really both, and they both fill a need at different times in people's daily routine of their life.
Yeah. And so I think that, really the answer is maybe we're over fragmented, but eventually we're going to consolidate like the best podcasts or the best TikTok channels or the best YouTube channels. That's what's going to sort of be like the go-tos.
And I think you're already starting to see it now. You're watching the big guys, jump in and force the consolidation. I think Sirius Radio just did a big deal with Tribune to really push Simplecast and stuff like that. And yeah, it'll be consolidation. We look at it. I mean, our podcast stuff. We're building this women's block because we said, okay, with one podcast, maybe we get 10,000, which means you could only go to kind of local advertisers. But if I do five, and I get the same demo across 5, I now have 50,000. I can now go to L'Oreal or, P&G with it.
Larry, where do people connect with you? Where do people get your book? I'm assuming you can get your book wherever you get books, Amazon, whatnot. But what's the socials? What's the website you want to send people to?
Well, you could go to, well, the name of the book is called Off Script. And so you could either go to Off Script podcast or offscriptbook.com and find it. Or, people, the email that I actually get myself, and I do answer all my email myself, is ljn@ljnmedia.com. But yeah, the book is available Amazon, Barnes, Ingram,
Everywhere.
all the usual places.
I'll link everything below. Last questions just to pull out a couple final thoughts from you. You've had an incredible career. If you had to, look at not what you've learned, but what you had to unlearn to be successful, the thing that you think held you back the most, what would that thing be?
Well, I grew up I grew up in a very poor neighborhood. Um, I grew up in Brooklyn, but before it was trendy Brooklyn. So I grew up in an area called Coney Island, which is still the hood. I mean, you go through there today and it's still a war zone. Burnt out buildings and stuff like that. It's beginning to gentrify. But, my parents came from, immigrant mentality, and their, wishes for their kids were get a civil service job and be able to retire at 65. And, so I spent a lot of time having to listen to other people's design for my life as opposed to what I knew was gonna make me happy. And so I guess the greatest thing I learned is just, follow your heart, follow your gut. Um, and again, so second you say to people, just imagine, you've lost them. Just if it feels right to you, and you got to be honest, you got to evaluate. Like I say, I come up with 10 new ideas every day, and by the time I go to sleep, I realize most of them were dopey. But I'm honest enough about myself to go, stupid idea. What was I thinking? What's next? Just don't waste your time on stuff.
I love it. But if you do believe in it, like you have to commit to it.
You gotta, like I say, find something you're good at and work your butt off and become great at it, and then that will become your passion.
The last thing that I wanted to ask you, you've given over a lot of wisdom, and maybe just go a level deeper on this thought, because say you could only pass on one life lesson to your kids because it was the most important life lesson that you've ever learned. You've given over a few, but what would be those final words of wisdom that you'd pass over to your kids?
Well, I think we're all on this planet for a finite amount of time, and I think our purpose here is we're here to leave this place better than we found it in every way, from people to the planet to animals and stuff. And to me, the object in life, and I've always had this conversation with my mom when my daughter would be dating. My mother would say, "Well, is it serious?" And it made me start to think. I'm going, "Well, what does that mean?" She goes, "Well, are they going to get married?" And I'm going, "You know what? My wish for my daughter, all my kids, is to be happy. The wish for myself is to be happy. It's not to be rich or whatever, but it it really that's the object, is find your happy place